So we need to make up lesson 3435 that I had planned to do today, but with the high winds and no power, and since I'm not going to see you this week, we need to get this lesson done. We only have a few more weeks of classes after Thanksgiving break, and so want to make sure that we get everything done before the end of the semester that we need to get done. So make sure you have your books. You need to be writing these. I will be checking and giving a grade for having these notes filled out. So if you don't have your book out, get your book out and make sure everything that I write down on here that you write in your notes in the book. You need to make sure that that's what I was going to say. If you have any questions or if you don't catch something, just pause the video. That's one of the advantages of the video. I know you can't stop and ask questions, but you can pause and write stuff down. You can re-watch something if you don't understand it. And of course, after Thanksgiving, I will be at school and will be able to answer questions. But you need to have this started. Alright, so we're going to be looking at two other forms of linear equations today. The first one is called point slope form. Okay, so as it says down here, you've learned how to write an equation of a line by using its y-intercept. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to write an equation without the y-intercept. So typically with 2 points. Okay, so the point slope form, I don't ever use it to graph from this form. I only use it to write equations. I think that's what's most helpful about it. So if you want to make a note, use it to write equations, and that is without the y-intercept if we don't know that. So notice the name is point slope, so that means the two things we have to know for this form is a point and slope. So the other form, if you recall, was slope intercept form, and for that one, that was the y equals mx plus b. We had to know the slope, that was the m, and then the y-intercept, the b. And so for this one, we need to know not the y-intercept, but just any point and the slope. So here's the form right here. Okay, so the y and the x are going to stay, and then it's y minus, and then we're going to have a y coordinate. So the y sub 1, all that means is it's saying use the y coordinate from the point. It's how they distinguish between the y of the equation and the y of the point. So this is the y coordinate from the point. We still have to know our slope, and notice slope is still m, and then x minus x1, that is the x coordinate from a point. Okay, and we don't really need, I'm not gonna go through and make sure you know why it works. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the computer and tablet situated. It's kind of all over the place. There we go. So you don't have to necessarily know why it works, just you need to know how to use it. Alright, so next page. Alright, so let's look at an example. So I'm going to write it up here again. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And this is the point from the coordinate, the y point coordinate from the point. This is the x coordinate from the point, and this is the slope. Okay, so it says a line passes through the point 8, -4 and has a slope of 2/3. What is the equation in the point slope form of the line? Okay, so let's identify. So this is going to be the x coordinate is what goes in for x1. The -4, that's my y coordinate. That's what will go in for y1. and then this is my slope. That's what will go in for M. Okay, so then we just have our equation. I'll rewrite it here so you can see what we're going to plug in for where. So this y stays the same. The y coordinate is a -4. M was the slope, that's 2/3. And then the x coordinate of the point is 8. So this is the form in point slope form. We don't typically ever leave it in this form. Even though the instructions say to put it in point slope form, I want you to go ahead and write it also in slope intercept form. Okay, and so the way that we do that, first I'm going to simplify this. Two negatives become a positive. Okay, so then step 1, to get it into slope intercept form, the first thing you do is you distribute. So I'm going to distribute that 2/3, and if you have a calculator you can just multiply, but 2/3 times x is just going to be 2/3, and then 2/3 times, oops, I forgot my x, 2/3 x, and then 2/3 times 8, so minus, that's going to be, we'll leave that as 16/3, and then we have y plus 4. And then the second thing we do is we either add or subtract this y number, this number that's with y, to get y alone. And so since this is a plus 4, I'm going to subtract 4. And I'm going to subtract 4 from here. And once again, you can use your calculator. And so then these cancel out. And we're left with y equals, so notice y is by itself, 2/3 x, and then -16/3 minus 4 is going to be minus 28/3, and we can just leave it as a fraction. So that's our answer. That's our equation in slope intercept form, or we can use this. This was our equation in point slope form. Okay, so numbers 1 and 2 are going to be homework. The instructions say to write it in point slope form, but I also want you to write your answer like we just did in slope intercept form. Okay, so you have to start, because we don't know the y-intercept, we only know a point, you have to start with point slope form, then you change it to the slope intercept form. Okay. So we're going to just skip. I don't care about graphing from this form. I always just say change it to slope intercept form and graph from that form. It's way easier. So we're just going to skip this problem, and we're going to skip these two for homework. Okay. So here, when we did the slope intercept form, we actually skipped the problems that had writing equation in with 2 points, and that's what we're going to learn how to do here, is write the equation of a line given any 2 points. Okay, and it says the first thing you need to do is to find the slope. So number 1, the first thing we're going to do is find the slope. Then we use the slope and one of the points to write the equation. So then step 2, we use a point and the slope, and then to write the equation, and then the third thing we do, I'm going to squeeze it over here. Actually, let's just move it all, and that's fine. Oops, nope, not gonna mess with that. Never mind, we'll just leave it there. And then the third thing we do is then we're gonna just change it like we just did to the slope-intercept form. Okay? Alright, so we have our points. So we have the point -2, -3, and let's just ignore this part. We're just use this point, and we'll just use these 2 points instead of this one. So instead of and this one to write an equation of the line. So we have -2, -3, and 1, 4. So the first thing we have to do is find the slope. And you learned how to do that back in lesson 3.1, like the rate of change in slope. And so that's our M. And the way that we do that is we put the y value, remember the y value goes over the x, and then the y value here over the x, and then we subtract. So we get -3 minus 4 is -7. And then -2 minus 1 is -3. And then 2 negatives become a positive, 7/3. So there's our slope. And then now we're going to write it in point slope form. So we can use either of these for point slope form. I like to pick points that don't have negatives. I think they're just easier. So then the second thing, so we're going to use a point, and we're going to use the point 1, 4. It doesn't matter. You'll actually get the same equation. But let's use this one, and we're going to write our equation. So remember, the form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we're going to use the y coordinate. Remember, this is x1, this is y1. So we're going to use this y coordinate. And then the slope we just found up here, so 7/3 times x minus 1. So, and then this part down here actually tells us to put it in slope-intercept form. So we'll just kind of continue this problem down here. And remember, the first thing I said to do is we're going to distribute. So the part on the left stays the same. I don't have 2 negatives to change it to a positive, so we just leave it. And so that becomes 7/3 x, and then 7/3 times -1 is minus 7/3. And you can use your calculator to multiply if you need to. And then the last thing is we want to get y by itself. So I'm going to undo this -4, and the way we get rid of -4 is by adding 4. They have to be opposites to cancel out. And I'm going to add 4 here. And so then we get y is now by itself equals, I'm going to bring this guy down, 7/3 x, and then use your calculator. You can add this, -7/3 plus 4 is going to give us a positive 5/3. And that would be our answer in slope-intercept form. Okay? So if we go on to the next page, number 5 and 6 is going to be homework. So they don't list the points, but you can see the points right here. So you can find the slope from the graph, or you can list it. I'll help you. This one would be, this point would be -3 and 4, and then the coordinate of this point is 1, 1. So we want to write the equation of that line, and then this one, the coordinate of this point is 1, 2, and the coordinate of this one, -1, -2, that'd be -3, 1. So if that helps you, and then find the slope. You can use the slope by finding it from the graph or by doing the equation like we just did. Okay, so the last problem, the last example from this one, is writing using a table to write an equation. Okay, so It's actually the same thing. We can just pick any 2 points. So the table shows the number of gallons of water Y in a tank after X hours. The relationship is linear, so we can write a linear equation. What's the equation in point slope? I don't want it in point slope. I want y'all to do it in slope intercept. I want you to get it used to going to that form that models the data, and then what does the slope represent. So remember, that first thing that we need to do is we always want to find the slope. And so I'm just going to pick these 2 points. Doesn't matter which ones, I just usually pick the first 2. So this tells me this is my X, this is my Y, so this is like my first point. This is my second point right here. And I'm just going to subtract these. And remember, the Y goes on top. So 3320, the X goes underneath it, and then minus the other Y, so that'd be 4570 over 3. And then we're going to subtract these. And I get negative 1250 over negative 1. 2 negatives become positive, or you can divide this, negative 1250, and anything over 1 is just itself. So that's just going to give us a positive 1250. So that's my slope. It does ask, what does the slope represent? Then our slope represents, it's our change in water over the change in time. So that's how many gallons it's going per hour. So it's changing, like filling. It doesn't say if it's filling up or being drained, but it's being drained 1,250 gallons per hour. That's what it represents. Okay, so then part 2, we're going to write our equation and use a point. So you can pick any of these 4. I'm just going to pick the first point. So I'm going to use the point 23320. Okay, so point slope form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So the first y is part of my equation, then it's the y coordinate from my point, so that's the 3320. M is my slope, that's the 1,250, and then I'm going to change the x1 from the point, and that is 2. So that's my equation in point slope form. And then once again down here it's asking me to change it to the slope intercept form. Okay, so we'll finish that down here. And the first thing that we do when we change it to slope intercept form is we distribute. So this first part stays the same. And then this times x is just 1,250x. And then do 1,250 times 2, and we get 2,500, and that's minus, so this stays minus. And then the last step is we got to get rid of this number by adding or subtracting it. Since it's negative or subtracting here, to get rid of it we add it, and if I do it to this side I have to do it to this side. So that's going to cancel out these 2 numbers and get my y by itself. The x term just comes down. And then if I do negative 2,500 plus 3,320, I get a positive 820. So there's my equation in slope-intercept form. Here's the slope. This is the y-intercept. And that's what, and then ask, what does it represent? And remember, our y-intercept is always our starting amount. And so I can look up here, because I'm talking about the water for the y, I can say what it represents is that we started with 820 gallons. Okay? So that's that example. All right, so numbers 7 and 8 are going to be homework. And then it does want you to put in slope-intercept form. Tell me what the slope and y-intercept mean. Number 9 is going to be homework. And then let's skip over here. Ooh, that went really small. And then if we go to the next page for this one, you're going to do numbers 10. That's homework. Number 11, I didn't have you graph it, so you can skip that one. And then number 12 is going to be homework. And then stop for this page. Okay? So you don't have to do this one. You don't have to do this. So that's that for 3, 4. We're going to do one more lesson for this for today. So if you want to skip to 3.5, turn over to 3.5. So now we're going to look at standard form. So this is our third form. So when we're talking about forms with equations, we're not writing new equations for lines. It's just a new form. Like I always think of it like your name. You know, there's different names. Like you know me as Mrs. Carr. My husband knows me as Catherine. I have friends who call me Cat. So that's 3 different names, but they all refer to me. It's just different how different people relate to me. And that's what it is with these forms. It's all the same form for an equation, but it's just different ways we can relate and use the equation. Okay? So this last one we're going to learn is standard form. Okay, so it says in this lesson we're going to learn how to use intercepts to graph a line. Okay, so remember, so an intercept is when it crosses something. Okay, so the y-intercept is the y-coordinate where it crosses the y-axis. The x-intercept is going to be where it crosses the x-axis, and that refers to the x-coordinate. Okay, so we could just, like, for example, if I had a quick little graph up here. Okay, so I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be like a y-intercept of 4, or it's the point 0, 4. Notice it's the y-coordinate, x is 0. An x-intercept, let's say an x-intercept of 4 would go on the x-axis. So this is the y-axis, so I'd go over 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be the x-intercept, and it has the coordinates 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. So notice they both have 0. The y-intercept has the number for the y-coordinate, 0 for the x. The x-intercept has the number for the x, 0 for the y. And then we can see that because I have 2 points, you can actually graph a line once you know those 2 points. So that's what we're going to learn how to do. Find those 2 intercepts and graph the line. Okay, so standard form of an equation. Okay, so this is a really easy form. So it looks like this form. So standard form, it has a number times x, ax, and then plus or minus a number times y, by, equals c, just a number by itself. Okay, so this is standard form. So we can see it, a number times x, this one's minus, a number times y, and then 0. Equals a number without any variables. Okay, so the way that we find the x and y intercepts, to find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y and solve for x. To find the y-intercept, we plug in 0 for x and then solve for y. Okay? And then I'm going to show you a quicker way that you can kind of do that. So here's my first one. So to find the x-intercept, I'm going to plug 0 in for y. So for the x-intercept, I'm going to cut this in half, and then I'm going to cut it in half again. So for the x-intercept over here, I'm going to keep the x term, and then I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So notice instead of y, I put 0, and that equals 60. So then I'm going to simplify and solve for x. So I get 5x, and 6 times 0 is just 0. And I really don't have to put this. Minus 0, it doesn't change anything, right? So really, this just goes away. When we multiply by 0, it goes away, and I'm left with 5x equals 60. And then we divide both sides by 5, and I get x equals 12. So this is my x-intercept. And then to do the y-intercept, it's the same thing, except for I plug 0 in for x. So instead of x, I put 0, and then I keep the y part, so minus 6y equals 60. And once again, 5 times 0, anything times 0 is always 0, and that doesn't change anything. So that actually goes away, and I'm left with just negative 6y equals 60. So what I like to call this is, and I need to get this, I call this like the cover-up. So notice when I plugged in 0, this part went away. So it's like I ignored this part of the equation, and notice I had just 5x equals 60. That's what I got down here. And then for the y-intercept, the x part went away, and I was left with just negative 6y equals 60. So I called this, I'm going to move my little box, I called this the cover-up method. We cover up the x, find the y. Cover up the y, find the x. Okay, so let's finish solving this guy. So make sure, though, this sign gets stuck to that number. So it's a negative 6. We divide both sides by negative 6. That divides out, and we get y equals negative 10. So my y-intercept would be negative 10. Okay? So that's how we do it. That's our x-intercept, that's our y-intercept. So let's try this again, and let's use the cover-up method. So if I want to find the x-intercept, I'm going to cover up the y part, and I'm left with the equation. So for the x-intercept, I'm left with the equation 3x equals 12. And I just use my finger to cover this up with, or whatever. You don't have to, don't actually shade and block it out, but I just can't show you my finger on this. So we get 3x equals 12, and then to get x by itself, divide both sides by 3. So x equals 4. This is my x-intercept. And then to find the y-intercept, I need to get rid of the x, so I'm going to cover up the x term, and I'm left with a positive 8y, so I don't have to put the plus there. It's understood to be positive. 8y equals 12. Divide both sides by 8. and we get y equals 1.5. So then my y-intercept is 1.5, 1.5. Okay? So that is how we find our intercepts. Okay, so let's go to the next page. So numbers 1 and 2 are going to be homework. Okay, so let's look at this example number 2. So now graphing, so when we graph them, we just find our x and y intercepts. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me put my arrows. So we're going to draw my y-axis going straight down, x-axis coming over, and actually, because I can see the future, I'm going to move this guy over here. There we go. So put that guy, oops. Put that right there. Yeah, close enough. Alright, so for this one, I'll go ahead and help you. We'll put this one going like this. Oh, actually, no. This one we will put going down like here. And then the other one we will put going this way. That should work. And then for this one, let's see. Here, let me draw it and then I'll move it. So don't draw it yet. Let's see here. So this one we'll put up here. And this one can actually just stay as it is. There you go. Alright, so we're going to find our x and y intercepts. So let me get my little box so I can cover things up. So to find the x-intercept, we're going to cover up the y. So for my x-intercept, I have the equation 2x equals 20. And we divide both sides by 2, so x equals 10. So I'm going to come over here. This is my x-intercept. On my x-axis, I'm going to go over 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I still didn't quite get it over 10. So right here is where my point is going to be. And then to find the y-intercept, we cover up the x, and I have the equation 5y equals 20, and I divide both sides by 5, so y equals 4. This is my y-intercept. So on the y-axis, I go up a positive 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put my y-intercept, and then I just draw a line through both of those points. And that is my equation. That's my line, my graph. Okay? Pretty simple, so just finding that, and then you put those on the two axes and graph. Pay attention to whether, remember, positive x is on the right, negative x is on the left, positive y is on the top, negative y is on the bottom. So number 3 and 4 is going to be homework. And now let's look over here at this next practice. So right here, let's just go right here. You can write the equation in form where sometimes we have just y equals a number or x equals a number. The graph of y equals a number is always a horizontal line, which means it goes side to side. My y values stay the same. It's the opposite of the direction of the axis. The graph of x equals a number is a vertical line. Okay, the opposite of its axis. These x coordinates aren't going to change. Okay, so let's put some, let me put my axes on here. So let's see, here's the x-axis and the y-axis. And I might do this a little fast for you, so if you need to go back and pause it while you draw these to get them to match, that's fine. Just so you're not sitting here watching me draw lines. So there's the x-axis, y-axis, x-axis, y-axis. That one I didn't quite get. I'll go back and move that so it's more on it. And then x-axis. And this one I'm going to scoot over a little bit because I can see the future. Alright. So there's our axes. Alright. So the way that you can also do this, if you forget which way it goes. So x equals 4. That tells me I have to go to the x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's where it has to go through. It has to cross, this one has to go through the x-axis at 4. So then, to go through this, my line has to go this way. So it's going to be a vertical line going through that. Okay? The next one, it says x equals -1. So once again, on my x-axis, I go negative, tells me I go to the left 1. And put a point there. So it has to go through the x-axis. So it has to go up and down. Remember, these two are not functions. They are linear, but they are not functions. Okay? Now the y equals, I'm actually going to do this one first. It's easier. So y equals means it has to go through the y-axis. Okay, so here's my y-axis. I'm going to go up. Positive tells me I go up 1. And then I have to go through this, which means I have to go side to side. That's going to be a horizontal line. And then lastly, this one's a little tricky. So that's why I saved it for last. Y equals 0. So it's got to go through the y-axis. So here is 0 right at the center, and remember, we can see this one, it has to go through it. Technically you could draw this one either way, but it goes the opposite. Here's where that remembers, it goes the opposite direction of the axis, so the y equals is actually going to go through that way. Y equals 0. So that's how you do horizontal and vertical lines. So numbers 5 and 6 are going to be homework for you. Graphing those two. And then go to the page. Got one more problem, one more type. So learning how to, so we're actually going to skip. I don't care about transforming it. To me, if they're already in slope-intercept form, graph it in slope-intercept form. Don't use integers. Okay, don't use the that. So skip these two. Don't have to do that. So lastly, writing an equation. Okay, so when standard form, remember ax plus by equals c. The way I remember this one, so this one's going to come in the form, this is going to tell me sum of this. It's going to compare two things. We have sum of this and sum of that, sum of something else. So like pencils and pens, pennies and nickels, you know, two different things, and then it's going to always equal a total amount. Okay? So this one's a little bit. So remember the slope-intercept form, we had a starting amount plus a rate equals a total. This one is a sum of this, sum of that equals a total. Okay? So we're just going to skip this part. So it says, suppose a store charges $15 for each movie. What equation describes the number of songs and movies? So we don't have songs. Let's say that the songs are $10 each. Okay? So they charge $15 for each movie, $10 for each song. Okay? And then we want to know, well, what equation would describe all of the purchases we could make for $60? So this is my total. So we can see the sum of this, we have movies. The sum of that, we have songs. And then that's going to equal our total. And because it's $15 for each movie, that's why it gets multiplied. So like my movies could be 15x, so each one, 15 for one, another 15 for two, another, so it gets multiplied. My songs are $10 each, so that would be 10y. And if I add those two total costs together, it has to be $60. That's all I have to save. So these are pretty easy to write the equation. We're just going to skip this part. Okay. Oops. Don't know what I did there. There we go. All right. And I'm not going to mess with having you graph these. I just want you to write the equation. So homework for numbers 9 and 10. You don't have to graph, just write the equation that describes it, and then you don't have to do this part right here, finding the coordinates. We might talk about that later in class, but don't worry about it here. So not graph, just write the equation. Don't worry about the combination, answering that part. Just write the equations. Okay? So lastly, the three forms right here. So slope-intercept form, remember the name tells you you have to have the slope and the y-intercept. This is easy to graph from. So from this form, it's easy to graph using our y-intercept and the slope. And this one, to write an equation, this is the starting amount plus the rate or the slope times x equals the total. Point slope form, I only use it to write an equation when given 2 points or a table. And then we always end up going back into this form. Not necessarily to graph, just whatever. So let me see. So it always ends up going back to this form, and we put our final answer in that form. And then standard form helps us, we find the x and y intercepts. And then this one, the way we can write it in that one, this is the sum of this plus or minus the sum of that, two different things, which equals a total amount. Okay? All right. And then if you need to pause that to finish writing. So homework, you're going to do number 11, 12, 13, actually you don't have to do number 14, we skipped that. So go through number 13 and then do number 15, and then you can stop. You don't have to do those. Okay? And that's it. And I will see you. This homework assignment will be published on Canvas, and it will be due the Monday that we come back from Thanksgiving. And if you have questions, we can answer it then. All right. Have a great break.